Masechta Shavous, Daf Yud Amud Aleph, 15 to 16 lines from the top. Rabbi Meir Omer. So the Gemara is now starting with the Shita Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that Kol HaSeidim, all the Seidim of the Yom Tovim, the Soyer HaChitzon was Yom Kippur, right? Then you have the Seidim of the Regalim. And like we have, according to, by each one it says Soyer. B'Soyer, Reish Chodesh, Pesach, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres. There the Torah says the lashon of B'Soyer also see Kaparas and Shabbat. They all forgive on all different types of tumah, of mikdash v'kadashah, on a case where there's no chiyuv of a carbon, and also on a adam tahir that had eaten from kachim tmeim. Okay, Zak the Gemara. Rabbi Chanina asked, my time to Rabbi Meir, what's the reason of Rabbi Meir? From where does he know that all the Seidim are going to be Mechapa and all those Aveinos? And the Gemara Amakra, because by the Kabbanis of every Yom Tiv, in Bamidbar, Prakim Chav Ches Tu Chav Tes, it says Usi'ir, with above, Usi'ir Chatas Echot, the Pasuk could have written Se'ir. Instead, the Torah writes Usir. Where do we find the Torah writes Usir? So, the extra above. But where do we find that? Reish Chodesh, Pesach, Shavuos, by all of them Tovim. And he goes through the whole Seder, Shani, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres. There, the Torah says to being between the Kabbanis, Amusafim, Useir Izam Lechates. But it says with above. So we find Hukshu Kol HaSidim Zelazah. We compared all the Sidim one to another. Vav Moisiv Alayim Arisha. The Vav comes to be Moisiv on the previous one. Reish Chodesh is Mechap on what? On somebody who was tired that ate Kachim Tameim. Then comes the Seidim of Regalim. Seidim Regalim add, in addition to this, that it's Mechap on Adam tired that ate Kachim Tameim, it's Mechap on somebody who entered the Mikdash, or somebody while being tamei, or eating kachim while being tamei, without a yediyah b'tchilu b'saf. That there was no yediyah b'tchilu b'saf. Yeah, b'shegah. Aber seretzach as nicht gewen kein yediyah b'chlal nicht. If there is a yediyah on both sides, there's a kamayla v'yedet. If there's a yediyah b'achroina, then you bring the sarah chitzen. If there's a yediyah, here it's talking about the siyar regalim forgives. On a case of Mikdash B'Kadashim, there was no Yediyah, but right, no Yediyah, but clear with like those things. So that's what the Vav comes to teach you. And then the Soya Yom HaKippurim, where it says Usir, that it forgives not only on Mikdash B'Kadashim, where there was no Yediyah B'Chlal, but the Sir. Hachitzin forgives even for where there was only Yediyah B'Sof, Unishkin Yediyah B'Tchila. The mother is thinking, each one learns from the previous one. Like Pesach comes right after Seirei Rosh Chodashim. Pesach learns from Rosh Chodesh. What comes after Pesach? Shavuos. So Shavuos learns from Pesach, and that's how it goes. So says the Gemara, how could you say that? Lamed mi dava lamed. But we had this before. By kachim, you cannot learn out one from something that learned out from another. Lamasha, you want to learn out the seizim of Yom Kippur, the seizim that was hachitzah, which talks about that he had only a yediyah basaf, but no yediyah lechatchila. The seizim about chutz forgives for that. But it also forgives for no yediyah at all from Siyar Regalim. And it also forgives for some Adam Torah that ate kachim. How could you learn that it forgives for Adam Torah that ate kachim? That you're learning out from Pesach. And Pesach, how do we know that Adam Torah can eat, who eats kachim to make Yechayev, that it forgives forgives from Seder Rosh Chodashim? So how could you say Seizim learns out from Pesach, which Pesach learns out from Rosh Hashanah? We can learn out, but the klal is you can learn out something that's learning out from something else by kachim. Only has to be direct. It cannot be indirect. The learning out from one, which learns out from another. So you want to hold kasha. This is no kasha. Kulumi kama gamri. Whenever it says all of them have usiir. So each halacha is learned directly. Usiir. You learn even the seizim, which forgives only for the Yedi Basaf, learns out that it forgives for Adam Torah, who ate kachem tmeim, directly from Siri Rosh Chodesh because of the Vav. So it has a direct connection. Says Gemara, I hear you.
So each Vav works on the first.
Each Vav works directly for each carbon. Each one has a Vav, and it's direct connections to each other. It's not like it's learning out one from the other.
Let's go right to the first.
Right to the first, or if that's for Adam Torah that ain't kachim, or for Pesach, the Sir Galim. So the Sir of Yom Kippur learns directly from Sir Galim. Says Gemara Taina, it's understood. Called the Usir, wherever it says each one that has the vav, Usir is that direct limud. But Hatzeres, you put him like Sibbe Usir, it doesn't. It's not written with above. From where do we know that these Seirim are mechaper on Adam Torah that ate kachem? And Michal, how could you learn out even Sir Rosh Chodashim that it should be mechaper on the Yom Kippurim where it doesn't say with above? There's no connection. And the Gemara, Rabbi Yonah says we have to give a different way of learning out that all these kabbanis are mechaper on the same avedas. From where Amakar, it says in the pasuk, "Elu tasal Hashem b'mayadechem." These you shall make to Hashem in their time. Huksha kol hamaydim kulum zelazeh. So we are comparing all the mayadim to one another. All the Yom Tov. Zag the Gemara.
Why do we need all the Vavs?
You don't.
So
Oh, so he'll be Father Limud right now. He's saying that's not where the limud is. That all these different kabbanis forgive all the sins equally. Says Gemara, how could you say that? Ish Chodesh is not a Yom Tov. Says the Gemara, and for the Gemara, Ivra b'ames Ish Chodesh nami ikemayit. Ish Chodesh is also called a Yom Tov. Kili Oma Abaya, like Abaya said, Oma Abaya, Tammuz, the Hishaita, Tammuz of that time, that year, that the Menagim went out. The second year, coming out of Mitzrayim to spy in Eretz Yisrael, and they came back with Lashon Hara. So it says, Maluya Malyu, the Eibishter, the Bezdin was Ma'abed the Chodesh of Tammuz, and made it not just 29 days, it made it a 30th day. So this that it made it, so it's made the extra day, another day, which is, it says, Nachad, the day of Yom Tov, what? Like it says, it says that because we knew that Tisha B'Av, the day of that the Eibishter designated for a day of tragedy, there's the day of Tisha B'Av, that the Yidam Geveint umzist, because of they were crying when they came back from spying in Eretz Yisrael, and they said Lashon Hara, so the night going to Tisha B'Av, they were crying. So in order to designate that was the night, so Bezdin was Me'abed Chodesh of Tammuz to make it extra day, because if not, it would have been Yud. But it says they added that day. It means they cut a line mayed. They wanted it to be this. Cut a line mayed, lish by Bachurei, to break Bachurei, those that were the chosen ones. So that it was called a Yom Tov. They adding the extra day Yom Tov. They call adding the extra day of Shechines. They called it a Yom Tov. Rabbi Yechon said, "Umayder Rabbi Meir b'Sayir Hanas b'Fnim." Rabbi Meir is Mayder, but they gave the Sayir that was Nas b'Fnim, where that forgives on which one? On a Yediyah, but on the Sayir Apnimi forgives on a Yediyah Batchila, but no Yediyah Basal. Shurein Mechapa Kaparasam. But that Seir Hapnimi cannot forgive for the other ones, for Adam Torah that ate Kachim which Hatmein, or for the case of Sir Harigalim that there was no Yediyah but Chilul Basaf.
It's on its own.
It's on its own. And the Sir Harigalim and the Sir Rosh Chodesh cannot forgive for, and the Sir Achitzin cannot forgive for the sin of Sir Hapnimi. So okay. So it says, who ain't mechaper kaparasam, because it says kaparachas. It says b'negeya that the chipan al kanois v'ashana. It says one kapara mechaper. That means Aaron was mechaper with the dam of the sarapnimi. That's the only kapara that this sorry could forgive. Vein mechaper shtei kaparas. It cannot be mechaper on more than the sin of that one sin that there was a yediyah l'tchila v'lo yediyah b'asav.
Why did I need to? Because before we said that all the Seirim and Machapa
On one another, sure. So he
So
says.
we even included the one that's
With the, so he's telling you no, Sirah Pnimi stands on its own. And Hein and the Sirah Musafim, Ein Mechapim Kaparosai. How do we know that the Sirah Rosh Chodashim and the Sirah Regolim and the Sirah Izim Bachutz, how do you know it's not forgiving for the sin of Sirah Pnimi? Amakar says in the Pasuk, Achas Mashani Yechaper. Kapara Zu Loi Tehei Elapam Achas Mashani. The only one that could be a kapara for that sin is the kapara that's brought once a year. But no other carbon except for that one could be mechapa on this kapara. So you want to bring even a raya that's a standalone. The Sirizim, Pnimi is on its own and it's not mechapa for other Avedas and other Avedas is not mechapa for it. Tanya Nami Hachi, we like Nabraisa, the Al,
Even there's a Vav there also?
Mitavo, Navo, this is Gunstolfen. And we're out of the above because it says Eila. We're learning out from Eila Tasalash Mayadechem. That's where we learn it out. Anyway, Tanya Nami Hachi. I'm going to bring you a Braisa. Similarly, we learn Al on the case of Tumas Mikdash V'Kadosh, which ain't by Yediyah Klal, where there was no Yediyah whatsoever. Lo B'Tchila Lo B'Asev. And B'Chein Al Shein Ba Yediyah B'Tchila Ava Yesh Yediyah B'Asof. And so too a case that there was only a Yediyah B'Asof. He's not talking about that he was a Yediyah B'Tchila. Don't forget that Yediyah B'Tchila is only by Sirah Pnimi. So far we didn't mention that. V'chein al adam ter she'achal satamei, and that's it. Those are the three Avedas. He doesn't mention the Aveda of Yediyah B'Tchila, which is the Sirah Pnim. What does it say? Sirah Regol, Sirah Shchedus, V'asor, Hanas B'achutz Mechaprim. Those are the words of Rabbi Meir. V'ila Hasor, Hanas B'Pnim, Shayrei. But the Sir, the Pnimi, he omitted, and he doesn't even mention the Aveda of Yediyah B'Tchila. And also with the Geya that it could be Mechapa on the other Avedas, doesn't mention he's Mapnimi amongst those that could be Mechapa on all the other Avedas. So you see it's standalone. Rabbi Shimon says the Siri Rosh Chodashim forgives only on Adam Torah that ate kachim and not any other kapara. Shal Golim is mechaper on somebody who didn't have a yediyah loy b'tchilu and b'asreif, and Sir Chitzim of Yom Kippur is mechaper on somebody who only had a yediyah b'asaf. Says the Gemara, why shouldn't all the Sudim forgive for one another? You see, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not combined together that each one forgives on the other sin. It doesn't work that. Sir Rosh Chodashim is only for Adam Torah that ain't kachim. Sir Golim is for
Who said that it does?
Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yehuda, the previous one was Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, Rabbi Meir also, yeah. But Rabbi Shimon argues, he says each one is individually. So Gemara, where do we see that? It's a white talk. It says Gemara, it's understood that the Siri Rosh Chodashim cannot forgive on a sin of what the Siri Regalim is, which is a case of that there was no Yediyah B'Tchilu B'Sav.
We're all talking about one sin, the Kodesh and
no, we're talking about three different sins. But Siri Rosh Chodashim is Adam Torah Shachal Kachim Tamei. Siri Regalim is
we're talking about Kodesh and Migdash.
Yeah. So he says, how do we know the Siri Rosh Chodashim is not going to be mechaper on the sin of Regalim? The Amakra, because by Siri Rosh Chodesh it says Avoid. B'Lashon Yachid, Avei Nachad U'Noisa. The Siri Rosh Chodesh can only forgive for one sin, not more. But he cannot forgive for another Avei like that. There was no Yediyah B'Tchilu B'Saf. He can only forgive for the sin of an Adam Toher that ate Kachim Tamei. Ela the Regalim Nechapru. The Siri Rosh Chodashim let Regalim, Siri Regalim forgive on the Adam Toher Shachal Kachim. Why can't he forgive? And you want to have a cry there. It says. Again, Benegeya to the Reish Chodesh, it's in the Schatz Reish Chodesh, it says, Oisa. The only one that can forgive on that Adam Torah that ate Kachim is Oisa. Which is Oisa? Oisa Dafka, meaning Dafka Oisa Noisa Aven, the Ein Achet Noisa Aven. The Rosh Chodashim. Only the Rosh Chodashim can forgive on an Adam Torah that ate Kachim Tamei. And the Golam not, because it says by Siri Rosh Chodashim. It says the word oisa. That's the only one could be a kapara. And that could be a kapara for the sin of Adam Torah that eating kachim
The
flame.
Gemara says that fish like that Rosh Chodeshim or the Chapra and Golem.
Because it says it says a lashon yachid. It can only forgive for one sin.
Okay.
How do you know Siddur Golim? Why can't the Siddur Golim forgive?
Why can't the young Taivim the Chapra?
Yeah, because by Rosh Chodeshim it says oisa. Yes, no, by Rosh Chodeshim it says another word, oisa. That only the Rosh Chodeshim can forgive on the sin of Adam Torah eating kachim and no other carbon.
That's the oisa.
Oisa. Okay, Zaki Manabishleim. The Regolim mechapim. It's understood that the Regolim cannot be mechapa of the chitz shel Yom Kippurim, which that sin is talking about that there wasn't a yediyah b'tchila, but there was a yediyah b'so damakra, because it says by the sor shel Yom Kippurim achas b'shana yechaper kapara zu of sor shel Yom Kippurim ela achas b'shana. So therefore, the only one that can forgive is the sor chitza by the sor apnimi. Yeah. That's Sorah Pnimi. Now we're talking about Sorah Chitza. Ela Chitza the Yom Kippurim the Chapru the Siddur Golim, but let the Sorah Chitza of Yom Kippur forgive on the Siddur Golim. And the Gemara Amakra it says in the pasuk Achas v'chipar na kanois Achas kapora Achas mechaper vein mechaper shtei kaporos. Even the Chitza, you can only forgive on one and not on another. But achas, when does the word say achas? The word achas is written by Sarah Anas Mefnim. Not bachutz. Amakra, it says milvad chatos hakipurim. In addition to the chatos benoisiv to the Sarah Pnimi, you have the Sarah chitzin. And we compare the chitzim to the pnimi, all the same dinim. That a hekesh, that all the dinim that apply to the pnimi apply to the chitzim.
Why do we machalik if it's yediyah b'sayif and ish yediyah b'sayif? He said that the pnimi is only if there's no yediyah b'sayif, and the chitzim is talking about kind of thing.
The chitzim is that there was a yediyah b'sayif but no yediyah b'tchila.
We're not interested in everything. We're talking different.
Each one has its own achas, which doesn't allow one to learn from the other.
But
So,
he said that you learn one from the other.
what do you learn? That it's limited. That only that carbon can be mechaper for its avera, and not for another avera. Says Gemara, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Eimah Mishmai. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Reb Shimon that my Shna the Rosh Chodeshim the Loy mechaper ad Regolim. Why is that Rosh Chodeshim you said is not going to be mechaper on Regolim? The Makra, because it says in the pasuk Avoin Echad Unayis, which is B'lashon Yachid. Avoin Echad Unayis Ve'Nayis Shnei Avoin by Rosh Chodeshim. That's why Rosh Chodeshim cannot forgive on the sin of the Golem. Says the Gemara, the Golem Nami Lo Nechaper ad Rosh Chodeshim. We should say the Golem also cannot forgive for Rosh Chodeshim. The Makra Ve'Oisa. It says V'Oisa, meaning only Rosh Chodeshim can V'Oisa, only the Sir Achatz of Rosh Chodesh who Noisav could forgive for that sin. The Ein Achem by Rosh Chodeshim. So we're asking. Rabbi Shimon says they do mingle with one another. Rabbi Shimon says that the Siddur Golem does forgive on the Rosh Chodeshim. So how could you say that? It says Oisa, that the only one that it can forgive is Rosh Chodeshim and not Siddur Golem. So Rabbi Shimon answers Oisa loy mashmalei. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda holds that the word Oisa he doesn't learn it as a miyut. And to teach us a new din that only Rosh Chodeshim can forgive on Adam Torah that ate kachim to be. He doesn't hold up with the Oisa, and he holds that the Siddur Golem could also forgive for the sin of Adam Torah that ate kachim, the sin that the Rosh Chodeshim forgives for. Why is the Golem different that we say can't forgive on the oven that the Sarah Chitzin forgives, which is the case that there was a Yediyah Basaf, no Yediyah Betchila. And he wanted to Amakra, it says in the pasuk Achas Mashana. It says once Kapara Zu of the Sarah Loy Tehei Ela Achas Mashana. What? There's no other carbon that could forgive for the sin of the Sarah Hachitzin because only the one that's sacrificed once for the year. So say Yom Kippurim shouldn't be able to forgive for the sin of the Golem, and Yudab shouldn't say they mingle. Yom Kippurim, the Soyer Achitze, could forgive on the sin of the Golem where there was no Yediyah B'tchila V'loi B'asayif. Huh? Yeah, that's what the Seder Golem comes to forgive for, where there was no Yediyah B'tchila V'loi B'asayif.
But he said that Yom Kippur should forgive on that, right?
Yom Kippur forgive. We want Rabbi Shimon says the Soyer Achitze, which normally forgives only for Yediyah Basaf, V'lo Yediyah B'tchila. We said no other covenant can forgive for that because we learn Achas. So he says if you're learning Achas, learn the other Achas that teaches us that this is the only one that can forgive, and not that the Sirah Achitze can only forgive for one sin, and not for the Sirah Regalim. And according to Rabbi Shimon, it could also forgive for the Sirah Regalim. So he says, Achas Bashon Eksiv, which says again Achas a second time to tell us Kapara Achas Mechaper, that only it could only forgive for one sin. The Ein Mechaper Shtei Kaparis, and it cannot be Mechaper for two Kaparis.
Both the Pnimi and the Chitzi can only be Mechaper on one sin.
Yeah, they both have the two Achas. Yeah, that's the question. So but he learned. Reb Shimon learns, but Reb Shimon learns that Soyer Achitzin could forgive for the sin of Regalim. So he says Achas le'mashmalei. He says this the second Achas. Help us in the second Achas that it could only be Mechapa one kapara, not for two, and therefore it could be. Very good. You're asking well. No, right. So the Chik Siv Achas. He says, where is the second Achas referring to the Soyer which is Nasa B'Pnim?
I said that we use the first Achas for that, no?
He says the second, wait 1 second. If so, if you're not learning the Achas, you're saying that the Achas that's written is only going on the Soyer Nasa B'Pnim, not on the Soyer Nasa B'Chutz.
Yeah.
So then there's no Achas whatsoever. By the Soyer Achitze.
Yeah.
So that's Chashayla now. Now you opened up a whole bomb. If so, the Regalim Namne Chaper Ad Yom Kippurim. So let the Soyer Regalim also forgive for the sin of the Soyer Achitze. The only reason why he said it doesn't forgive on the Soyer Achitze because it says Achas. But now they said Achas doesn't apply to Soyer Achitze. Let's forgive. Regalim should forgive for. As like there's no Achas. So he says Paket on the Achas, vet Achas, the Sirah Regalim could forgive for the Sirah Achitze. He says the Chiksiv Achas, we saw Nasa B'Pnim Ksiv. He's saying right. So to forgive. So that the Soyer, the Regalim should be able to forgive for the Sirah Achitze. And the Iman Elohim Achas Mashmalei. You're right. Achas is learned by Soyer Achitzin also. But Shainei here it's different. The Amakra, the Chipan, Kanois Achas Bashana, Kanois the Mizbeich HaPnimi, was Soyer Achitzin, Lo Yehukish B'Posim about Chatas Gibron, Mizbeich HaPnimi, Le Soyer HaPnimi. There's two Achas. There's one Achas Benegei to the Mizbeich, and one Benegei to the Achas was by the Soyer HaPnimi. He says, what do we learn out of the Soyer Achitzin from which Achas? We learn out from the second Achas that we compared to the Soyer Pnimi. That what? We only learn out the part that the Soyer that sacrificed on the Mizbeach once a year, that's the only one that could be Mechaper on the Aveda of Soyer Achitzim, which means that there was a Yediyah Basov. But the second Achas, he says, we don't learn out from the second Achas. We don't learn out from the Soyer HaPnimi, which means that it could be Mechaper on two Avenes. The second Achas, which we want to say could only be Mechaper for one, because there's two Achas. One is to tell you, one Achas is to tell you that that's the only one that can forgive for the sin, no other Kabbanis. That we learn out from that Achas. We do learn out from the Soyer Pnimi. The second Achas, we don't learn out from the Soyer Pnimi, from the Sirah Pnimi. That one we don't learn out. So we say therefore by the only but to the Soyer Pnimi. to the case where there was a Yedi B'tchila with Lo Yedi B'Sof.
Okay.
So that one stands alone.
Okay.
It both ways doesn't happen. By the Sarah Chitzay, you have one way. You have one achas. One achas that teaches us that the only one that could be mechaper on the Aveda that there was only a Yediyah Basov is the Sarah Chitzay. But this that a Sarah a Regilim or the Sarah Shchenish could forgive on that sin also.
Oh, good. We do
Yeah,
say it.
because it's only one achas that we're learning out. But by the Sarah Pnimi, you have two achas. One achas to tell you the only one that can forgive is the Sarah Pnimi when there was a Yediyah B'tchila. And then the second achas teaches us that no other korban could forgive, only this one.
When you say this one, you mean the Pnimi.
The Pnimi, right.
So we say that the second achas does not apply to the
To the Chitzon, right.
Does not?
So he
So
says
the
that,
first, so the Pnimi has two achas?
yes,
That's what we're learning here?
that's how he learns.
To make sure.
It's only compared to the Soya Pnimi. Here, the Kapora Achas Mechaper, Ve'ein Mechaper Shtei Kaporas. That one Kapora, it's Mechaper, and the Soyer, Achitzin, can only be Mechaper one, but it cannot be Mechaper on two Avenis. That's the only Achas that we learn out. But, the Mizbeir Achitzin, Afilu Shtei Kaporas. But
So you
Mizbeir,
just say the first, the what?
there's two Achas. One achas that tell you the only one that can forgive is the Sarah Pnimi could only forgive on the Yediyah B'tchila, Lo Yediyah B'Sof. That's not the achas that we learn out from the Chitzim from the Pnimi. Then there's another one that teaches us that the Sarah HaChitzim can only forgive for one kapara, not two. That's the achas that we learn out from the Sarah Pnimi. That second achas, it's really called the first achas.
That teaches from the Pnimi that we could learn out two things?
We only learn out one thing from the Sarah Pnimi.
Okay, well,
That-
I'm talking about the Chitzin.
The chitzin, we only learn out one achas from the pnimi. That what? That that is telling us that the only one that could be mechaper. Sorry, no. That it could be mechaper. That the sarah chitzin can only be mechaper for one kapara, not for two kaparas. That's the only thing that we learn
So
out.
that's the same as the Pnimi.
The same as the pnimi, but the pnimi has one more thing. That the only carbon that can forgive on that sin is the Sarah Pnimi. By the Sarah Chitzim, we don't learn that out. By Sarah Chitzim, you can have others that forgive on that sin.
We can learn out from that.
So again, it says over there, Midam chatas hakibur achas b'shani yichapa chatas hakibur hainu asara pnimi upa hakayin gadol. Lefikach sever Rav Shimon ben Yehuda shekishalon maadnu mikan shakaparas asara pnimi eina ela achas b'shana vein kap ma'achas shemechapa kaparasi af asara chitzim mechlal miyudzeh. That the only one that can forgive on that sin is only the Sorah Chitzin.
Which sin?
I said it wrong again. Let me go back. The only the achas that we learn out from the Sorah Pnimi is to tell us that the only one that could be mechaper on the sin, where there was a Yedi Basov, is the Sorah Chitzin, and no other one.
Not the Pnimi, not the Pnimi.
Only the Sorah Chitzin. We're talking about not the Sir Regalim, not the Sir Rosh Chadashim cannot be mechaper on the sin where there is a Yedi Basov. But this that the Sorah could forgive on the Adam Torah that ate Kachim Tmayim. By Sarah Chitzim could forgive. That achas we don't learn out. By Sirah Pnimi there's two achas. One is to tell you the only carbon that could forgive on that sin is only the Sarah Pnimi, right? And the same thing we're going to say by Sarah Chitzim, that's the part we do learn out from one achas. But on the other achas that tells us that it could only be mechaper one aveda and not two, that we don't learn out Sirah Chitzim from Sirah Pnimi. Meaning that the Sirah Chitzin could even forgive for two Avedas. Okay.
So how do we deal with that achas? That extra achas, the second achas. The second achas still belongs to the first.
Because it says Mavad Chatas Hakipurim only by one achas. It says by the achas of. I'll just bring it down over here. It says. Akaparos haser apnimi al akaparos hamizbeach. He says the chipa an al kanoisa shal hamizbeach apnimi achas mashana. That one is not talking about on the kapara of soy apnimi. It's only talking about kaparos hamizbeach. Okay, it says kanoisa of the mizbeach apnimi. The sirah chitzin is not mukish to the mizbeach apnimi. You understand that achas? It's not
Well, we want to say that they are
to the soyer, to the achas that's written by soyer, not to the achas that's written by mizbeach. Okay. Like the Gemara, Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Tmidim Shlei Yehutzachol Letzibur. There was when they had to be covered tamid twice a day. So by the covenant tamid, what would they do? They would have to put. The Gemara brings down in Erchin, I think, that they would put down. He brings down from which? Let me see from which Gemara. 12. Let's see. He brings down from Rosh Hashanah. From Rosh Hashanah, Erchin. It's mainly Erchin. It says, what would they do for the Tmidin? You had to leave the bay.
What, it was extra?
Yeah, one second. So what they did was every day they had to have at least 6 animals in the pen. And out of those 6 animals, they would choose 2. They would wait 4 days and see if the animal's kosher. After 4 days, they would pick 2 out of the 4. Now, from which monies did they buy the covenant commitment? Always from the year that they collected of that year. But when it came to the end of the year, and they had 6, and they only chose 2, there were 4 left over. What would you do with those 4 left over? It's from the old money. And you're in a new year.
You got to use the new money.
So you got to use the new money. So he came up with a chap. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Ula said the name Rabbi Yochanan, Nivdin Tmimim. You are able to redeem it. You come up with clean money, outside money. You take the money and exchange the kedusha because it's kedusha zaguf. You really can't redeem kedusha zaguf. It says you take chulin money, you exchange it. So now the kedusha went on the money. That money you'll put for the bedek habayis, the kedusha the money, and now you could use from the new shkalim and buy back these 4 animals, these 4 leftover animals, and use them for kabbanis. Got it?
They become free. In other words,
They were redeemed with outside money. The kedusha was exchanged from the animals to the money. That money goes to the bedek habayis, and now they bought.
Extra money came in.
So, fine, but now they can use even though it's kedusha
No,
zaguf.
it's extra money. That's all.
Yeah.
Why is it
But he
extra
couldn't-
money? They went
But
with
he sold
places.
he exchanged the animal for the money, and now he has the animals.
Yeah, now you
Money
can
and
use
animals.
the new money. Why couldn't you say l'chatchila to use the new shkalim? Because the new shkalim is considered as kedusha. You can't use kaddish money to redeem a kedusha into chulin. So that's why you had to use outside money to make the exchange.
Where did outside money come from?
He got outside money. That's what he
The
says.
Gizber.
The Gizber or whoever it was, he had somebody, or he got from somebody money, clean up money.
Somebody did it.
That was chulin, not donated, and he used it to exchange the kedusha of the animals.
It wasn't even kedusha. It was chulin money.
Chulin the money. It's the only way.
Now he has the money, and he has the
And now he can use the new shkalim of that year to buy back these 4 animals.
Could you use it for something else?
What do you mean, the animals?
Yeah.
Usually that's why they want to use it back for kedusha, because it's a zilzul. It was designated for
The clean
the tmidin.
the good animals.
They were designated for tmidin. So it says, Yabana Yosef Rabba, v'kam laha, la laha shmaita, and Rabba sat down, and he said this is sugya, the shmua of Rabbi Yochanan. And Rav Chizda was listening. Rav Chizda, man tzayis lach, Rabbi Yochanan Rabba. He says, who's going to listen to you and to Rabbi Yochanan your Rebbe? V'chi kedusha shebehem leichan holcha. Where did this kedusha go? It's kedusha zaguf. How could the kedusha zaguf leave? Amalei. So Rabbi said back to Rav Chizda, like this, you don't hold like what we're saying. That we don't say, where did the kedusha go? We don't say that. I'll prove to you. But now we learned in the Mishnah. Moisak Teres. that they had ketores that they would make for every day, 365, and for Yom Kippur they had 3 more, which was 368. But Amalei Chafnov, a full fist didn't fill up the ketores. So he says between 60 and 70 years, there were Shirayim that gathered up to like 182 mana. A lot. What would they do with the ketores? So the Gemara Mahayoyisambay, what would they do with the leftover ketores? Says Gemara Mafrishin, they would take out money from the Trumas Halishka and pay these people, pay these guys, those who were from the Beis Aftinas. They were the ones that made the summon. So they would take out from the Lishka to pay them.
Oh, they used to keep the extra summons by themselves?
No, it was there, but now we have to get rid of it. It's the new year. And you have to buy it from the new sculling, the ketores. And you were left over with so much ketores. So what would you do? So he says the Beis Haftinas got paid money. So they would take that money from the Lishka.
The money that they would pay for.
They were being paid for now, for Malach. It's Chulim become money. But it's one hand to another. The Beis Halishka, he took from the Beis Halishka. They bought they exchanged the ketores. They transferred the kedusha from the ketores onto the money, and then they bought it back, with new sculling of that year. And you see, it worked.
No, the same idea.
Same idea. Ma frish me manu mais tu salishke schar how money. The schar, the payment for work to the Beis Haftinas who made the psalmim, and umechalen oisa, and they made the ketores. They made it chalal. They made it ois kedusha. Yeah, chulin. They made it into chulin, and then mechalen oisa al. Money, and then the kedusha was transferred to the mois for the money for the work. And while it was chulin, so it was now given to them as the schar, the ketores. And then they would rebuy it back from them.
How did they make it ois?
They paid for it. They paid. They were supposed to be paid, so they allowed it. They allowed that their money for work should be able to buy out the leftover ketores, and then they would pay back the workers to buy back these remaining ketores.
It went from the right hand to
The left hand. Exactly what happened. Yes. And became holy again. Yeah, they bought it. Says Yimar B'Amai, name a kedusha shebem leichanoch. Let us ask that question, and we don't say that there. So say the same thing by when it comes to the Tvidim, to the behemoths, that this takana should work. I'm like, if you bring me a eye from Tatus, shiny Tatus. Tatus is different. The Kedusha is Damimum. By Tatus, that's Kedusha of money, not Kedusha Aguf. But by the behemoths, it's Kedusha Aguf. Kedusha Aguf, you cannot transfer off the Kedusha. And we'll stop over here.